We should take a look at this and draw it in some sort of perspective. This is a slice taken through human brain cadaver. And down here, this region, is the medulla. And in fact, it's a part of the medulla that we call the open medulla. And the reason we call it that is here is the fourth ventricle here, and whenever the medulla has the fourth ventricle above it, we call it the open medulla. Yes, and there is a closed medulla. It will be caudal to this region. Okay, so open medulla. What do we got inside of all that? Well, we should look at a couple of things here. One is this region and its bilateral mate. So this tells us a lesson. What you find this is the midline of the brain right here. So what you find on one side of the brain, on one side of the midline, and what you see on the other side of the midline are the same thing. And that this region here is the same on the two sides. It is a nucleus, which in the central nervous system is a collection of cell bodies of unique structure, function, connectivity. And so in here are going to be little cell bodies. Now, it doesn't look like it, but this region is actually gray. And so are all these other regions, like this thing up here. That's gray. This stuff down here. This stuff right here. Gray matter. Gray matter includes, gray matter equals cell bodies. Collections of cell bodies. So nuclei, gray matter, cell bodies, dendrites, the axons that are synapsing upon them, all of that, where you have all of that mixed together, is gray matter. And so nuclei, collections of neurons in the CNS, gray matter. And you'll look down here, and that's not gray matter. That's white matter. White matter, well, that stuff is myelinated axons. Myelinated axons. Okay, so what is it about nuclei? What is it about this white matter? Now, this is a specific axon tract. It's called the pyramid. There's one on each side, so together they're the pyramids. Pyramids. These are axons that start all the way in cerebral cortex and end only in spinal cord. And so these are axons that traverse the entire neuraxis. They start in telencephalon, and they don't end until they're down in spinal cord. And in all of this is a lesson. In all of this is a lesson. The inferior olive is found only in the open medulla. If you go to the closed medulla, which is caudal to it, you don't see it. When you go to the pons, which is rostral to it, you don't see it. So you do not see inferior olive any place other than in the open medulla. The pyramids, or at least the axons that make up the pyramids, which start in cerebral cortex, and so we call them cortico, and end in spinal cord, spinal axons. Corticospinal axons have a length of as much as a meter. They start in cerebral cortex, they descend all the way to spinal cord. That is some great distance. And the lesson here is fairly straightforward, that fiber tracts tend to be long, continuous, extend across many segments of the neuraxis, large hunks of the brain. Whereas nuclei, these collections of cell bodies, tend to be discrete. Most of them are no more than a centimeter in any one dimension. Many are much, much smaller than that. And so that's the key difference that you can see among nuclei and fiber tracts. Now the corresponding terms, nuclei, collection of cell bodies in the peripheral nervous system, so that's CNS, collection of cell bodies in the PNS, we don't call them nuclei, we call them ganglia. And a collection of axons in the peripheral nervous system, we call them, logically enough, nerves. So we don't call them axon tracts, as we call the corticospinal, the pyramids. We don't call them fiber tracts, we call them nerves. And here's a great example. This is the eighth nerve. These are the axons of the eighth nerve. And this thing would continue out in this direction. So out here in the periphery, these are the axons of the spiral ganglion and the vestibular ganglion. So the collection of cell bodies that gathers information from hair cells of the inner ear. Those are the spiral ganglia, the cochlea, the vestibular ganglion for the vestibular apparatus. Their axons form the eighth cranial nerve, and there it is. Those axons are going to come into the central nervous system, and they're going to terminate. There would be gray matter here, a little bit farther back in the brain. That's going to be the cochlear nuclei, so that's where the axons of spiral ganglion are going to end, whereas the vestibular ganglion is going to end here in the vestibular nuclei. And the point is this: collections of axons in the peripheral nervous system form nerves, and for ganglia, sensory ganglia, the corresponding nerves penetrate, get into the CNS, and terminate in the CNS on collections of neurons that are nuclei. So ganglia talk to nuclei in the central nervous system.